Good night for the sport. Didn't get what the decision I want, but we didn't get a loss either. So I felt like I won it. The last couple rounds. So um, it's cool. Lamont is a great fighter. Hopefully, I can get that rematch because I know what I can do in a fight. But it's cool.
Okay, questions?
Okay. Tank, it's KG with Fight Hype. I wanted to ask Tank, when the decision was read, the way that you reacted, it looked like you was upset. You slammed your gloves on the canvas. What was going through your mind when you heard the decision?
I didn't slam my glove on the canvas.
Okay, maybe I mistook from my vantage point, so that's my mistake. But what was going through your mind when you heard the decision?
Nobody like a draw, you know, from a guy that get knockouts and things like that. But it's cool. I feel like if we fight again, I could do more, and I should have did more. I was lost in the. I lost track in the rounds. That's why we need what is it called? Yeah, man. I didn't know what round.
Have you ever witnessed that moment when the line between sport and raw emotion completely vanishes? When the controlled chaos of the boxing ring spills over into something far more dangerous and personal? That's exactly what the boxing world experienced after Gervonta Davis and Lamont Roach Jr. stepped out of the ring. The bell may have signaled the end of their official bout, but it merely served as the opening round for what came next. Within minutes of the fight's conclusion, both men grabbed their phones and took their battle to Instagram Live. What unfolded wasn't just post-fight analysis or typical trash talk. It was an unfiltered explosion of rage that culminated in Gervonta's shocking declaration. "Thank me for not killing you, the *TCH. The words hung in the digital air like a threat, raw and unrestrained. But what pushed these professional athletes to this breaking point? What transforms calculated aggression into unbridled fury? And most importantly, was this genuine hatred or just another chapter in boxing's long history of manufactured drama? Stay with me as we dissect this explosive confrontation from every angle. The psychology, the build-up, the aftermath. Nothing will be left unexamined. Because sometimes, what happens after the final bell reveals more truth than anything that happened during the fight itself. The tension began brewing long before either fighter reached for their phones. Inside the squared circle, Gervonta Davis and Lamont Roach Jr. weren't just trading punches. They were exchanging pieces of their pride with every connection. The first significant moment came early. Gervonta, known for his unwavering confidence and seemingly impenetrable demeanor, suddenly dropped to one knee. His gloves rushed to his face, frantically rubbing at his eyes. The official explanation: a hair product had gotten into his eyes, causing intense burning. The crowd's reaction was immediate and divided. Some saw a legitimate medical issue. Others saw theater, a fighter looking for a reprieve, perhaps even a way out. "You good?" the referee asked, bending down to check on the champion. Gervonta nodded, but the damage to his aura of invincibility was already done. Across the ring, Lamont Roach Jr. didn't mask his skepticism. His eyes narrowed, a slight smirk forming at the corner of his mouth. That subtle expression spoke volumes. Weakness. "I see weakness." When the action resumed, something had fundamentally changed. The technical chess match had transformed into something more primal. Every punch from Lamont seemed to carry an accusation. Every counter from Gervonta felt like a desperate attempt to restore his reputation. The 12 rounds that followed were brutal, not just physically, but psychologically. By the time the final bell rang, both men were bleeding, exhausted, and harboring resentments that wouldn't be settled by any official decision. The judges had their scorecards, but the real verdict, the one that mattered to these fighters, would be delivered through their phones, directly to thousands of watching fans. Most boxers follow a predictable post-fight routine. They shower. They attend the press conference. They decompress. Not on this night. With sweat still dripping and adrenaline still pumping, both Gervonta Davis and Lamont Roach Jr. bypassed tradition and went straight to Instagram Live. Their separate broadcasts quickly became the hottest streams in the sports world as word spread. "This isn't over." Gervonta struck first, his voice still raspy from 15 rounds of exertion. Man was scared in there. Everyone saw it, running the whole time. Lamont, monitoring his rival's broadcast while streaming his own, fired back immediately. Who went down on one knee? Not me. Never me. The digital crowd swelled. Comments poured in so fast they became a blur of emojis and exclamation points. And then, as Lamont continued questioning Gervonta's toughness, the moment that would dominate sports headlines arrived. Thank me for not killing you, the asterisk TCH. Gervonta's voice elevated, eyes wide, veins visible in his neck. Thank me. You know what could have happened in there if I wanted it to. The statement wasn't delivered as hyperbole or metaphor. It carried the weight of genuine threat, crossing the already blurry line between promotion and personal vendetta. Lamont's response was equally concerning. Rather than de-escalate, he doubled down. You couldn't if you tried. We can settle this anywhere, anytime. Ring or street. What viewers witnessed wasn't the manufactured tension of a press conference. This wasn't calculated to sell tickets. This was raw emotion. Two men whose conflict had evolved beyond sport into something far more volatile and personal. As both broadcasts continued, insults escalated. Family members were mentioned. Past incidents brought up. The language grew increasingly explicit. Boxing, with its rules and regulations, seemed a distant memory compared to the unrestrained hostility playing out on thousands of screens. To understand this explosive confrontation, we need to dig deeper than just the fight itself. What psychological triggers transform professional athletes into digital gladiators, willing to threaten each other without the buffer of promotion or press? For Gervonta Davis, the eye incident represented a moment of vulnerability that struck at the core of his carefully constructed image. A fighter who has built his brand on being untouchable, unflappable, and unstoppable suddenly found himself on one knee, asking for medical attention. The whispers started immediately. In boxing's unforgiving culture, any sign of vulnerability becomes ammunition. Was he looking for a way out? Was the pressure too much? These questions, even unspoken ones, are kryptonite to a fighter like Gervonta, whose mystique is as valuable as his actual skills. His Instagram Live outburst wasn't just directed at Lamont. It was aimed at the doubt itself. Each threat was an attempt to reassert his dominance, to erase the image of him on one knee. The more extreme his language, the more he could distract from that moment of perceived weakness. Lamont Roach Jr., meanwhile, had been waiting for precisely this opportunity. As the underdog entering the fight, he needed more than just his boxing skills to level the playing field. He needed psychological leverage. Gervonta's eye incident gave him exactly that. During the Instagram session, Lamont repeatedly circled back to that moment. Each reference was calculated to remind viewers, remind Gervonta, and perhaps most importantly, remind himself that the champion wasn't invincible after all. Both men, carrying the weight of their reputations and the expectations of their supporters, found themselves trapped in an escalating cycle of aggression. Each insult required a stronger response. Each threat demanded escalation. What began as post-fight tension evolved into a dangerous spiral that neither man seemed willing or able to exit. The cynical view, one shared by many boxing veterans, is that nothing in this sport happens by accident, especially when cameras are rolling. Could this entire confrontation have been an elaborately staged performance designed to generate headlines and set up a lucrative rematch? There's certainly precedent for such theatrical rivalries. Boxing history is filled with feuds that seemed genuine but were later revealed to be collaborative efforts between supposed enemies. The financial incentives are undeniable. Bitter rivals sell more tickets than respectful competitors. "I've seen this movie before," said one prominent boxing promoter who requested anonymity. Two fighters hate each other until the check's clear. Then they're hugging at the after-party. It's boxing's oldest marketing strategy. The timing also raises questions. Both fighters going live simultaneously, ensuring their confrontation would be captured from multiple angles. The escalation happening at a pace perfectly suited for viral clips. These elements suggest at least some level of calculation. Yet for those who've spent time around Gervonta Davis, his reaction seemed too raw, too unfiltered to be performance. The veins bulging in his neck as he issued his threat, the tremor in his voice. These are difficult elements to fake, even for someone accustomed to the spotlight. Lamont's willingness to take the conflict beyond boxing, suggesting they could settle this anywhere. similarly crossed lines that most promotional work carefully avoids. There are certain threats that boxing's power brokers discourage, even for marketing purposes. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. The initial emotions, Gervonta's frustration, Lamont's opportunism, were likely genuine, but both men, understanding the economics of their sport, may have recognized the financial benefit of letting those emotions play out publicly rather than privately. Regardless of intent, the result was the same. Within hours, their confrontation had become the most discussed topic in sports. Controversy, once again, proved to be boxing's most reliable promotional tool. The boxing community's response to the Instagram Live confrontation was as divided as it was passionate. Social media platforms became battlegrounds of opinion, with fans splitting into distinct camps almost immediately. Team Gervonta supporters rallied around their champion with unwavering loyalty. That's just Tank being Tank. They argued across comment sections and forums. He's always been real, always been raw. That's why he's the best. He doesn't hide who he is. Many pointed to boxing's long history of trash talk and intimidation, positioning Gervonta as merely the latest in a lineage of fighters who blur the line between promotion and personal animosity. "All he said worse" became a common refrain, though many historians would dispute this comparison. Lamont's supporters constructed a different narrative. They positioned their fighter as the composed professional facing down an unhinged opponent. "Notice who maintained control," they pointed out. "Notice who's making threats and who's staying focused on the sport." This framing allowed Lamont, despite being the less established name, to claim a moral victory regardless of the official decision. In the court of public opinion, composure often counts for as much as aggression. But beyond these partisan reactions, a substantial portion of the boxing community expressed genuine concern. The "thank me for not killing you" comment struck many as crossing a line that shouldn't be crossed. Even in a sport built on controlled violence, there's promoting a fight, and then there's this, wrote one prominent boxing journalist. "When we normalize language like this, we're playing a dangerous game with a sport that's dangerous enough already." Parents of young boxers took to social media expressing dismay at the example being set. Gym owners worried about the culture being modeled for their amateur fighters. Even some hardened veterans of the sport suggested this confrontation had ventured into territory that benefited no one. Yet despite these concerns, or perhaps because of them, the viral spread continued unabated. Clips were watched millions of times. Memes were created and shared. Engagement metrics soared. In boxing's attention economy, controversy remains the most valuable currency, regardless of the potential costs. As the digital dust settled, both fighters and their teams began calculating the long-term implications of their viral confrontation. In boxing, today's scandal is tomorrow's selling point, and few scandals have generated as much attention as this Instagram Live explosion. For Gervonta Davis, the incident represents both opportunity and risk. His brand has always contained elements of danger and unpredictability, qualities that attract a certain segment of the boxing audience. This confrontation amplifies those elements, potentially strengthening his appeal to fans who value authenticity, however raw it might be. Yet there's also potential damage to consider. Corporate sponsors increasingly distance themselves from athletes whose behavior might reflect poorly on their brands. Gervonta's explicit threat, "Thank me for not killing you," pushes boundaries that make marketing executives nervous, especially in today's climate of heightened sensitivity around violent language. "He's walking a tightrope," explained one sports marketing executive. The qualities that make him compelling to hardcore fans are the same ones that make him risky for mainstream partnerships. This incident pushes him further toward the edge. For Lamont Roach Jr., the calculus is different but equally complex. Prior to this confrontation, he was known primarily to boxing insiders rather than casual fans. The viral nature of the Instagram exchange has significantly raised his profile, instantly transforming him from opponent to rival, a much more lucrative position in boxing's hierarchy. Getting people to know your name is half the battle in this sport, noted one veteran promoter. Lamont just accomplished that overnight. Whether people are supporting him or criticizing him, they're talking about him, and that translates directly to opportunities. The most immediate question facing both men is whether this confrontation leads to an inevitable rematch. Boxing history suggests it will, and that the second fight will likely generate substantially more interest and revenue than the first. Genuine animosity, whether organic or manufactured, remains the sport's most reliable marketing tool. Network executives are undoubtedly already discussing dates, venues, and promotional strategies. The narrative writes itself. Two men whose hatred couldn't be contained by the ring, facing off one more time to settle a score that has become deeply personal. What remains to be seen is whether this confrontation represents a temporary escalation that will be resolved in the ring, or the beginning of a genuinely dangerous feud that extends beyond the sport itself. Boxing has seen both scenarios play out, sometimes with tragic consequences. The explosive Instagram Live exchange between Gervonta and Lamont Roach Jr. took their rivalry to an entirely new level. The fight didn't just stay in the ring, it spilled over into their personal lives, igniting a storm of emotions that fans won't soon forget. Thank me for not killing you, the *TCH, isn't just another line of trash talk. It's a statement that will follow both fighters and reshape how fans view this rivalry. Whether it was pure frustration, a strategic move for publicity, or a mix of both, this confrontation has permanently altered the narrative surrounding both men. Where do they go from here? A rematch seems inevitable. The business of boxing thrives on genuine animosity, and few rivalries in recent memory have generated this level of authentic tension. Networks are undoubtedly already planning how to capitalize on what has become boxing's most talked about feud. For better or worse, Gervonta and Lamont have given the boxing world exactly what it secretly craves. Conflict that feels dangerously real in a sport that walks the line between controlled violence and primal aggression. What do you think? Was this a genuine moment of raw emotion, or was it all part of the show? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more updates on this rivalry that's clearly just getting started.